The forge hall of the Galactic Academy was loud that day. Sparks filled the air. Heat rolled across the wide room like a living thing. Students from many worlds stood around heavy metal tables, talking, laughing, and showing off their tools. This class was famous across the academy. It was where future warriors, engineers, and commanders learned how to create their first real weapon. At the front of the hall, the instructor stood still. Tall. Silent. Watching. When the noise finally settled, the instructor spoke in a calm voice. "Today's lesson is simple," he said. "You will forge a blade. You may use any material provided by the academy." That was all. The students smiled. Some laughed. This lesson sounded easy. Across the room, alien students rushed forward. One chose shining steel. Another selected a glowing energy alloy. Some grabbed rare metals brought from distant stars. They talked loudly about sharpness, balance, and power. This was their chance to impress the instructor and the rest of the class. Only one student did not rush. A human girl stood near the back of the hall. She was smaller than most others. Quieter too. She watched the room with calm eyes, her hands relaxed at her sides. While others fought over the best metals, she waited. Someone noticed her. "Hey," one alien student said with a grin. Did the human freeze? Laughter followed. The human girl finally moved. Slowly, she walked toward a corner table. On it were scraps, old materials most students ignored. Broken tools. Cracked pieces. And a long, pale object. Bone. It was thick and worn smooth with age. She picked it up. The laughter grew louder. "A bone?" someone mocked. "Is she joking?" Another student shook his head. "Humans really are behind the times." The human girl did not answer. She carried the bone back to her station and placed it carefully on the table. She ran her fingers along its surface, feeling its shape, its weight. Around her, the sound of forging filled the room. Hammers struck metal. Machines hissed. Energy blades began to glow. Students worked fast, confident, excited. The human girl worked slowly. She did not turn on any advanced machine. She did not use energy tools. She took a simple sharp stone and began to grind the bone by hand. Small white dust fell onto the table. The instructor noticed. His eyes followed her movements. He did not stop her. He did not correct her. He simply watched. The other students noticed too. "Why doesn't the instructor stop her?" one whispered. "She'll fail," another said. "Bone can't survive a real test." The human girl kept working. Her face showed no anger. No fear. Only focus. Each movement was careful. Each moment was patient. She sharpened one edge. Then another. The shape slowly changed. Minutes passed. The laughter faded into quiet whispers. Not because they respected her, but because something felt strange. She was too calm. Too sure. One student walked past her table and looked down at the bone blade forming in her hands. "You know this is pointless," he said. She did not look up. The heat of the forge rose higher. Sweat ran down faces. Sparks flew. The class pushed forward, eager to finish. At last, the instructor raised his hand. "Time," he said. The room fell silent. Students lifted their weapons proudly. Steel blades. Energy edges. Sharp, powerful tools made to cut and destroy. The human girl lifted hers last. It was not shining. It did not glow. It was pale and simple. A sharpened piece of bone. Laughter returned, brief, confident, careless. The instructor stepped forward. His eyes moved from blade to blade. Then they stopped on the human girl. For the first time, his expression changed. Not anger. Interest. Next, he said calmly, we test your weapons. The human girl tightened her grip on the bone blade. And the room, without knowing why, felt colder. The testing area stood at the center of the forge hall. Thick metal walls surrounded it. Old marks covered the floor, scars left by blades from many past classes. This was where pride often turned into silence. One by one, students stepped forward. A tall alien with silver skin swung his steel blade. The target split cleanly in half. Applause followed. Another student fired an energy edge. The surface melted instantly. More cheers filled the room. Confidence spread like fire. Whispers passed between students as they looked toward the human girl. She'll embarrass herself, one said quietly. She shouldn't even be here, another replied. The human girl stood still, holding her bone blade close to her body. Her grip was firm, but her face was calm. She watched every test carefully. She noticed how metal reacted. How energy burned. How force alone decided success. Her turn was coming. Before that, the instructor raised his hand. Observe closely, he said. This lesson is not only about results. It is about understanding. Some students nodded. Others barely listened. The next blade struck the target too hard. The steel cracked. Gasps followed. The student stepped back in shock. The human girl noticed. Too rigid, she thought. No give. She looked down at her bone blade. It was not perfect. Small marks remained. The edge was sharp, but not thin. She ran her thumb close to it, careful not to cut herself. Bone bends, she remembered. Bone survives. A student stepped closer to her table. You still think that thing will work? He asked, pointing at the blade. She finally looked up. It will, she said simply. He laughed. Against metal? Against energy? You humans really believe stories. She said nothing more. The instructor called the next name. The human girl stepped forward. The room changed. The laughter softened. The air felt heavier. Not because they believed in her, but because something about her silence felt wrong. She stood in front of the test target. It was made of layered alloy, designed to resist damage. No beginner weapon was meant to cut deeply into it. She held the bone blade with both hands. Someone muttered, "This will be quick." She did not rush. She remembered old human lessons passed down in quiet ways. Stories of survival. Of hunting with nothing but sharpened bone and stone. Of fighting when metal was not an option. The instructor watched closely. "Begin," he said. She moved. Not with anger. Not with force alone. Her strike was smooth. Controlled. She let the blade move naturally, guided by her hands. The bone blade hit the target. A sharp sound cut through the hull. Not a crack. A cut. The blade slid into the surface deeper than anyone expected. The target shook slightly. Dust fell. The room went silent. The human girl pulled the blade back. The bone was intact. Murmurs spread fast. That's not possible. It should have broken. She didn't even swing hard. The instructor stepped closer to the target. He ran his hand over the cut. His eyes narrowed. "Again," he said. Gasps followed. The human girl nodded once. She adjusted her stance. This time, she struck at a different angle. The blade sank even deeper. A clear line split the surface. The silence grew heavier. Students stared at the bone blade. At the human girl. At the cut marks that should not exist. The student who had mocked her earlier took a step back. The instructor straightened. "This is not luck," he said. The human girl lowered her weapon and stepped back. The instructor looked at the class. "You were taught that strength comes from power," he continued. "But power is not always force." He turned his gaze to the human girl. "And this lesson," he said, "is far from over." The human girl felt every eye on her now. No laughter followed. Only questions. And a growing sense of unease. The forge hall remained silent for several long seconds. No one spoke. No one moved. All eyes stayed on the deep cuts carved into the test target. They were not wide. They were not messy. They were clean, controlled, and precise. The human girl stood quietly, holding the bone blade at her side. The instructor broke the silence. "This test is complete," he said. A breath of relief passed through the room. Some students nodded, thinking the strange moment was over. But the instructor did not step away. "However," he continued, "this class will now observe something different." Murmurs spread again. He walked toward a sealed panel near the far wall. Few students had ever seen it open. The instructor pressed his hand against the surface. The panel slid apart with a low sound, revealing a second target. This one was larger. Darker. Thicker. Warning symbols covered its surface. A student whispered, "That's not a standard target." Another swallowed hard. "That's combat grade." The instructor turned to the class. "This material is used in battlefield armor," he said. "It is not meant for training weapons." Several students looked away. Others stared in shock. The instructor's eyes moved slowly across the room. Then they stopped on the human girl. "Step forward," he said. Her heart beat faster, but her face stayed calm. She stepped into the testing area once more. Whispers followed her. "This is too far. She'll break her weapon. She could get hurt." The human girl stood before the heavy target. Up close, it felt massive. Cold. Unforgiving. The instructor spoke again. "You are not required to strike," he said. "You may decline." She looked at the target. Then at the bone blade in her hand. "I won't," she said. Her voice was quiet, but clear. The instructor nodded once and stepped back. The room held its breath. She adjusted her grip. This time, she did not rush at all. She placed her foot carefully. She breathed in slowly. She remembered the lessons of Earth. Survival was never about strength alone. It was about timing. Understanding. Respecting the material. Metal resisted. Bone adapted. She struck. The impact echoed through the hall. Not loud. Not explosive. Just sharp and final. The blade did not bounce back. It went in. Not deep. Not fully. But enough. A visible cut formed on the combat-grade surface. Gasps filled the air. One student dropped his weapon. Another stumbled backward in disbelief. "That armor stopped plasma fire," someone whispered. The human girl pulled the blade free. The edge showed a small crack. Her breath caught for a moment. But the blade did not break. It bent slightly. Then returned to shape. The silence that followed was heavy and complete. No whispers. No laughter. No mockery. The instructor stepped forward slowly. He placed his hand near the cut, measuring it with careful eyes. He turned back to the class. "Look closely," he said. This weapon did not overpower the armor. He faced the human girl. It worked with it. He took the bone blade gently from her hands. He examined it from every angle. "This material bends," he continued. "It absorbs shock. It adapts. He looked at the students. You chose strength, he said. She chose survival. The human girl stood quietly as the instructor returned the blade. Students avoided her eyes now. Some looked afraid. Others looked ashamed. The instructor raised his voice. This lesson was never about forging, he said. It was about thinking. He paused. And today, he added, you were all outperformed by simplicity. The human girl stepped back into line. No one laughed. No one spoke. They only watched her. And for the first time, they did not see a weak human. They saw a warning. The forge hall felt different now. The heat was still there, the machine still hummed softly, but the sound no longer mattered. The students stood frozen in place, their weapons hanging heavy in their hands. No one spoke. The silence was not empty. It was full of fear, doubt, and thoughts that refused to settle. The human girl stood among them, holding the bone blade close. The small crack on its edge caught the light, but it did not weaken the blade. If anything, it made it look more real. More alive. The instructor turned back toward the class. You have all seen the result, he said calmly. Now you must understand it. Some students nodded slowly. Others stared at the floor. One alien finally spoke. His voice was low and unsure. But, bone is weak, he said. Everyone knows that. The instructor looked at him. Does weakness survive? He asked. The student hesitated. No. Does weakness adapt? The instructor continued. The student said nothing. The instructor walked toward the human girl and stopped a short distance from her. Tell them, he said. She looked up, surprised. She had not expected to speak again. She took a breath. Bone is not strong because it is hard, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall. It is strong because it bends. Because it learns. The students listened closely now. On Earth, she continued, humans did not always have metal. We had teeth. Hands. Bone. We survived anyway. She looked at the combat-grade target. We learned how to fight when losing meant death. No one interrupted her. One student slowly lowered his steel blade. Another placed his weapon on the table as if it suddenly felt wrong to hold it. The instructor stepped forward again. Your blades were built to dominate, he said. Hers was built to endure. He paused, letting the words sink in. That is why hers succeeded. The room stayed silent. Some students felt shame burn inside them. They remembered their laughter. Their confidence. Their certainty that technology made them superior. Now, none of that felt true. One student glanced at the bone blade again. What if humans had access to our materials? He asked quietly. The instructor's expression darkened. Then this lesson would already be over, he replied. The weight of those words pressed down on the class. The human girl stepped back, returning to her place among the students. No one mocked her now. No one looked at her with amusement. They watched her with caution. With respect. With fear. The instructor raised his hand. This class is dismissed, he said. Normally, that command would cause noise, movement, and relief. Today, it did not. No one moved. Students stood frozen, unwilling to turn their backs on the human girl. Unwilling to pretend that nothing had changed. Finally, one by one, they began to leave. They walked more slowly than before. Some avoided her entirely. Others glanced at her once, then quickly looked away. A few stopped. One alien, taller than most, bowed his head slightly as he passed her. She noticed. She said nothing. When the hall was almost empty, the instructor approached her again. You understand something most do not, he said quietly. Why? She thought for a moment. Because humans expect to lose, she replied. So we prepare not to. The instructor studied her face, then nodded. This academy will speak of today, he said. Not kindly. She looked up at him. That's fine, she said. They don't have to like it. A faint smile touched the instructor's lips. As she left the forge hall, whispers followed behind her. Not laughter. Warnings. Stories. The silence she left behind spread far beyond the room. And across the academy, something began to change. News traveled fast inside the Galactic Academy. By the time the next cycle began, whispers moved through corridors, labs, and training halls. Students spoke in low voices. Instructors paused mid-lesson. One story repeated again and again. A human girl had used bone. Not metal. Not energy. Bone. The forge hall was empty now, but the memory of what happened there refused to fade. The deep cut in the combat-grade target had been sealed and covered, yet everyone knew it existed. Proof that something they believed to be weak had challenged everything they trusted. The human girl walked through the academy halls alone. Before, students had ignored her. Now, they watched her carefully. Some stepped aside as she passed. Others whispered her name without knowing it. A few looked at her with something close to fear. She did not enjoy the attention. She kept her eyes forward and her steps steady. At the training yard, a group of students practiced combat drills. When she appeared, their movements slowed. One by one, they stopped. An alien student lowered his weapon. That's her, he said quietly. No one laughed. No one mocked. They simply stared. Later that day, instructors gathered behind closed doors. Data from the Forge class played on large screens. Slow-motion footage showed the bone blade bending, absorbing force, then cutting deeper than expected. One instructor spoke first. This challenges our materials doctrine, she said. Another nodded. Humans do not build to overpower. They build to survive. The words settled heavily. The Academy had always believed technology decided victory. But humans had learned something else long before they reached the stars. Across the station, the human girl sat alone in her quarters. The bone blade rested on the table in front of her. She ran her fingers along its surface. The crack had not grown. It had stopped, as if the blade knew its limits. A soft knock sounded at her door. She looked up, surprised. The instructor from the Forge class stood outside. You are being discussed, he said calmly. She nodded. I expected that. Some see you as a problem, he continued. Others see you as a solution. She looked back at the blade. I'm just a student, she said. He stepped inside. No, he replied. You are a reminder. He paused. This academy teaches dominance, he said. You showed restraint. He turned to leave, then stopped. Be careful, he added. Silence after laughter is dangerous. When he was gone, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She thought of Earth. Of bones buried deep in soil. Of ancestors who fought storms, hunger, and predators with nothing but what they could shape with their hands. Humans had never been the strongest. They had been the most stubborn. The next day, weapon design classes changed. Survival theory was added to combat lessons. Materials once ignored were studied again. Bone. Fiber. Natural structures. Some students resisted. Others listened. All remembered. Weeks later, a new class entered the Forge Hall. The instructor stood at the front, just as before. Today's lesson is simple, he said. Forge a blade. A student raised a hand. Any material, he asked. The instructor's eyes moved briefly to a sealed cabinet near the wall. Inside, resting on a dark cloth, was a pale bone blade. Yes, the instructor replied. Any material. In the back of the room, the human girl watched silently. No one laughed. The lesson had already been learned. And it would never be forgotten.